Hi, everybody. Here in front of us is the formulas and tables for the AP Statistics exam for 2020. I'm just going to kind of take you through it here and talk about what I think will be most useful, what will be possibly useful, and then what is just definitely not going to be on there. So for the first part here, descriptive statistics, we have the formula for average. You guys probably know about average. We have the formula for sample standard deviation in two different forms. Could be on there, probably not, but it's there in case you need it. These others all have to do with linear regression. This is the linear regression equation. This is plugging in x bar comma y bar because every linear regression contains x bar, y bar. And this is the formula for slope and correlation. So out of all these formulas here, traditionally on past exams, the only one that was really useful was the b equals r times s sub y over s sub x. This one has never really been used on an exam, and this one probably will not be used on this particular exam since linear regression probably will not be a main focus on the two questions. Moving on to the probability formulas over here. It's conceivable that these top two formulas could be on there, but I'm going to say probably not. I think the probability questions that could be on there will be normal curve questions, where you find the area on a normal curve, questions about independence, proving or disproving things are independent using conditional probability, which this is conditional probability, but you probably won't use that formula to find out the conditional probability. And then there's an outside chance that one of these two formulas using the binomial or geometric distribution can be on there. I would be willing to guess that the standard deviations will not appear on there. The means possibly could, but probably not. If anything will be on there, it would probably be one of those two. But ultimately, the top part of this formula sheet will probably not be used on the exam. Okay. Moving on to sampling distributions and inferential statistics. So these two formulas are super important. I'm going to put a star next to these. These ones will be on the test, no doubt about it, because there will be confidence intervals and test of significances on there. That's a main focus of the course. This is a generic way of finding a test statistic and a confidence interval. The phrase statistic, that's going to be x bar, p hat, could be x bar 1 minus x bar 2, p hat 1 minus p hat 2, anything that represents a statistic. In that sense, the parameter is going to be, if we use x bar for a statistic, the parameter would be mu. And then with proportions, it would be p and so on. So you kind of just think about what world you're living in, proportions and means, and then think about what the statistic is in that world and the parameter. If it is a confidence interval, you're going to have the critical value in the equation too. Critical value is either t or it's going to be z. T for means, z for proportions. And the standard error that you see in the denominator here and in the confidence interval formula, that's similar to standard deviation. And we'll talk about that as we get down here. But basically, this column that you see on page 2 is where you can find the formulas to plug in to those parts of the equation. We did not get to chi-squared this year, so you can certainly cross off this box entirely. Okay, we're going to erase this and move on to the rest of the packet here. Just give me a second. Okay, so as we move on here, we can see the standard error of the sample statistics. So this right-hand column is where you're going to find all of the formulas you would use for the standard error statistic in these two generic formulas. The point estimate that you see, they call it statistic now. So statistic is going to be over here. If they use the phrase point estimate, they are also talking about the statistic that you see on the far left-hand corner with the p-hats and the x-bars. As we go down here, this was not actually taught this year. This would have been in the second linear regression chapter that we ended up not having time for, so you don't need to worry about that. And ultimately, that's how you're going to use this page. That right-hand column is going to be the most important one. Just match up whatever kind of inference procedure you're using with what the statistic is on the left-hand side and use the standard error on the right-hand side. Okay, moving on to the formula, to the tables now. These are the z-tables. Most of you are just going to use normal CDF for this, but if you want to use the z-tables, there they are. We're going to skip through that and go to the t-table, because the t-table is ultimately what's going to be the most important of the tables, the most useful for this exam. If you want to find z-scores, z-scores are located in the infinity section down here. And infinite degrees of freedom is the same as the z-score. So if you want to find the z-scores for, let's say, a 95% confidence interval, go to the 95 right here for confidence level C. Just go one up, and that is going to be your z-score that you'd use in, let's say, a 1 proportion or 2 proportion z interval that's 95%. If you have an alpha value and you want to find out the critical value based on that, you can go to the tail probabilities up here, and the z-scores would be down here. The DFs on the left-hand side is specifically for t-scores. And remember, the DF is equal to n-1 for one sample t. So if you had a sample size, let's say, of 15, the DF would be 14, and you would just go across here, go to the correct tail probability or the correct confidence interval on the bottom. You'll notice that they are connected. The 96% confidence interval, for example, would have 4% tail area. Split two ways would have a tail area 0.02 on both sides. And the final page is something we didn't do. It is the chi-squared table over here. Really interesting chapter, but we just didn't have time for it this year. So you don't even need to print that page. I would just leave it be. If I was going to do something for this, I would probably just print off pages 1, 2, and 5, just so you don't have a bunch of clutter on your desk, and use those and mark them up in the way you would like, but you can certainly kind of use this video to pause and take some of my suggestions about showing the importance of this column and the importance of this specific part of the formula sheet. Okay, hope this helped.